Now, joining me shortly on the program this morning is a revered journalist in that regard, and he is the Abuja Bureau Chief, Head Northern Operations at the Daily Times Nigeria. He's also a brother. I'm talking about Mr. Dooyum. Mr. Dooyum, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Well, it's quite sad. I must say that a community which you're part of, very much like myself, has been hit with a tragedy that did not start on Sunday. Neither has it lasted a year. It's been over 2 decades since Benue began to count losses in over dozens. I don't know your first thoughts this morning as you look to speak on the issue.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very difficult period for us, not just as Benue people, but as human beings. I mean, humanity still exists. It's unimaginable that we would have the casualty level over an attack on the community, sacking the entire community, killing over 200 people. I mean, it's unimaginable, as if we're in a war-torn zone. Now, very sadly, again, is the fact that these attacks, to the best of my knowledge, are unprovoked. So what exactly could be the reasons for this? All kinds of narratives have been advanced as to attempts, deliberate, calculated attempts, land grabbing, displacements of people, and all that. And yes, that tends to go with the narrative. Or else, why would you explain that somebody wakes up and then decides these people are defenseless? Farmers going about their normal farming businesses. And what again worries me is the fact that we have a government, especially the statement they released by the presidency, it didn't, to the best of my knowledge, reflect the position on ground.
Now, on that part, many have been asking that should flags be flown at half-mast to reflect the government's sympathy. Yes, the president has had to reschedule his earlier visit to Kaduna to visit Benue. But do you think that there should be more of a national position reflected in the state of mourning over the lives?
Yeah, absolutely. If a national, because if the president could cancel his official engagement to Kaduna to visit and sympathize with the people of Benue, and as well do an on-the-spot assessment of the situation, is great. I think he will come back with a better appreciation of the situation on ground, because it's not a farmer header's crisis. It's not as if the other parties, it's not two parties at war. No.
Because his statement seems as though with the charge given to the government that he should mediate and reconcile.
Yeah, we're talking about, I think the statement sounds that this is beyond the immediate attacks or the conflicts, but he understands the presidency may have been coming from a background of a prolonged or protracted political conflict in the states. And I think if he's pushing for a reconciliation, I think if the political leadership of the state, both the state government and as well as the National Assembly members representing various constituencies of Benue State, and as well as appointees of Benue extraction, if there's a better reconciliation, if there's a better understanding of the dynamics of the conflict situation that has engulfed the state, and if they are able to come together, because I'm privy to the position of the state government, because yes, there has been peace initiatives, and very recently, in the wake of the attacks, the governor made it very clear, yes, he will still reconvene another peace meeting, calling on the illustrious sons and daughters of the state to find a way out of this quagmire. So calling for reconciliation, I think the presidency is coming from a background of its understanding of the protracted political conflict in the state.
Now, how much of an importance is the statement by the former Senate President of Nigeria, Senator David Mark? Speaking through his media aid yesterday, he did condemn it, but he says that beyond condemning it, that there is a danger of Benue citizens resorting to self-defense.
But it's really, It's sad. It's sad. Resulting to self-defense. Well, I will try to understand the context so I can better situate. Yeah, but again, my thinking is that if a revered elder statesman in the stature of David Mark would actually advise and warn against resorting to self-help, it's because there's a tendency for this situation to rather escalate further than what it is today. Now, the natural tendency of an average Benue man, once he gets engrossed in the conflict, I mean, it's hardly he retreats. It's on the books are there, the records are there, and so if the people are pushed to the point where they will have no option but to resort to self-help, I think it's going to be very disastrous. And again, I believe it's against that background that a revered elder statesman in the stature of Senator David Mark would issue such an advisory. And the thing is, again, because he understands that the authorities, both at the state and at the center, are on top of the situation. The presidency's visit is instructive. The state government is doing all it could to see how best they can manage the situation, and so they calls for calm, regardless of how angry the Nigerians have become, the residents have become, how agitated they have become, and whatever be the reactions, I mean, resorting to self-help to the best of management, rather escalate the situation rather than bring it under control, which should be what we should be pushing for.
Now, we also saw photographs following the protest along the Makurdi highway by Benue youths.
Yeah.
They had sort of a confrontation with security operatives. Those pictures will greet our screens shortly. And it's more on the position of the governor as well. He called for the youths to exercise restraint, citing that this protest might be hijacked.
Yeah.
Let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, but the governor's advisory is okay, is timely, because if the protesters, there's a tendency for any protest to be hijacked by elements who have other sinister motives beyond the reasons for the protest. The citizens have a right, the residents of the state have a right to express their grievances and then call on the authorities to, as a matter of urgency, intervene in the situation and then bring the situation under control. It's part of their constitutional right to protest and then express their grievances. I mean, we are killed, people are killed, massacred, it's genocidal, and then they have a right to express their feelings to the authorities. Again, the authorities also have a duty to also help manage the situation such that, or so that it does not escalate, so that other elements who have other motives and intentions do not infiltrate the protesters. It's on the path of caution. It is not as if I saw other media reports, groups condemning the governor for suppressing the protesters and all that. Instructively, I was on the protest on Sunday. I was there. So I witnessed firsthand what happened. The protesters conducted themselves excellently. There's no record of any destruction of government facility or
no vandalization.
No vandalization whatsoever. So the people were calm, the people were orderly, the organizers and those who led the protesters fully coordinated themselves very well. There was actually no reason whatsoever for a forceful suppression.
By forceful, you mean the use of tear gas?
The use of tear gas. I lost my classes
during the protest.
Yes, because I was not scamper for safety. You know, but then that's that. So I mean, it's not. It didn't go down well with the protesters, and we're not very comfortable with such a decision. But again, you can't be too afraid not to allow your people to express their grievances.
To ventilate their
grievances. I mean, the situation has called for much as, we have soberly reflected and are also looking up to the authorities because we put a government in place who swore to protect us, and then we believe in its competence and capacity to do that. But in the event it appears it's slow, or we seem not to understand where and how we are where we are going to. Unless it's also important to let the citizenry express whatever they feel within the confines or the provisions of the law.
Now, Mr. Dooyum is also joined by our next guest in the studio, who is the editor-in-chief of the daily Courier newspaper, Mr. Seun Oni. Mr. Seun, good morning to you and welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Mr. Brian, thank you for having me, and apologies for appearing a bit late.
No problem. Let's get straight into it. And this time around, Mr. Dooyum has talked about the devastating impacts of this crisis. He has also given us first-hand experience because he was part of the protest that happened in the city capital on Sunday following the killings in Yelwata and Guma local government area. But this morning, let's get your reaction to the statistics confirmed by the National Emergency Management Agency. Beyond 200 people dead, 6,000 people have been displaced from their homes. How much of an impending humanitarian crisis is this in that regard?
I think it's a tragedy that we are still talking about that number of lives lost in the country in 2025, a situation that we have been grappling with for more than a decade now. It's a sorry situation. Our condolences to people who have lost their lives, but it is very trite to also state that the government had actually not shown any capacity at all that they are able to actually nip this tragic situation in the bud. I think it's a sorry situation. I heard why your guest earlier alluded to the statement released by the CNC and was practically passing the ball to the governor of the state. I read it and I was almost weeping that we've got into a situation where the man that ordinarily he's supposed to be the one dishing the orders on what to be done, how it should be done, is now shifting the blame on the tables of the governor. Everyone knows in this country that a situation that has led to hundreds of lives lost in one full soup. And I usually tell people, if the official channel actually tells you 200, I think it's more than 200. If the official figure tells you 200, it's more than 200.
Because the governor was also speaking in the press briefing. He said there needs to be no comparison between the score counts from the police angle. In all of this, there's also very little news on the lives of security agents lost in the process. NEMA published 2 police officers, 1 NSCDC official as well.
You know, it's our style. We are usually opaque with things like that, and that's why even when the government official channel are now talking about the truth, people don't believe them, because over time they have built a culture of opacity. So even when they are telling you it's 2 people, 2 lives lost, even those of us who are in the media, we look at it and we want to get a first-hand information from eyewitnesses, if that figure is actually the truth or not. Look at what happened in Niger State, the flood. The SEMA, the State Emergency Management Agency, released the data. By the time our men were on the ground, we discovered the number was almost double of what they reported. That's part of the problem we have. And that's one of the reasons very serious security breach as this that has led to loss of life over time. Whenever the federal, the state government says it's doing XYZ, citizens really don't believe them. They don't believe, and you need that level of credibility to be able to forestall a repeat, because what we have seen is a pattern of attack and reprisal. That is the truth. A pattern of attack. I think we were here a few weeks ago.
Yes,
that Magban, that's the official body in charge of this Meati Allah of the thing, they raised an alarm that some youth have been rustling their cattle on the Benue. And one of the things I said there then, that our security will hear this type of intelligence, will not quickly go to ensure that it doesn't escalate. I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Now on this cattle rustling, I'll come back to you since you visited Benue very recently. There were also images circulating online alleging that some cattle were owned by a certain person, and the youth had taken more or less a vengeful stance on ensuring that those cattle are dispelled from the community. Is that true? What's the true picture?
Very true. A head of cattle belonging to a member of the House of Reps representing a certain constituency in Benue State, although he has kept them in a safe, so to speak, and he has actually ranched them, so to speak. Because of the reprisals of what happened in Yelwata, the youth of the community felt there's a tendency for these people that the MP has brought to secure his headers, his head of cattle, they are of the same ethnicity with the suspected killer herdsmen. So there was no need having them in the community. And I think it's against this kind of a background that distinguished Senator David Mark came out to issue an advisory warning against resorting to self-help. Yes, the cattle were ordered out. They were displaced from the community. They were displaced from where they were. And it's really very sad.
Now, in this regards, the next question would be, how do we get justice in this situation? Because now we find the CDS vowing to end banditry. It's a statement he made yesterday. Upon the arrival of the IGP, the National Security Advisor, and he himself, he said that they will be launching a cross-border manhunt for the marauding killers. How is this going to work in terms of finding those culpable of this dastardly act and bringing justice to bay?
Sadly, I won't. I'm not part of people who are of the opinion that the government really don't know what to do. I just think what is missing is the will to do the right thing, because it's a multi-hydra problem. There is the angle of ethnicity to it. There is the angle of religion to it, that even when you prefer certain solution, people from both dominant religion, Christianity, Islam on this count, we think this has something to do with us. We also have that dimension of this cattle ranching versus pastoral farming mix, and somehow the federal government working together with the state government must find an agreeable, and that's the only good part I'm seeing here. The president will be there tomorrow, I think, from his statement, and maybe for once the leaders across the device can just not this just talking
lip service,
not just the lip service, but for once talk about something that will bring a concrete solution. I think there is also a leadership problem in all this thing we are talking about, a leadership problem. I had alluded to the fact that there was a period we had a challenge from the part of Ekiti State I actually came from, when we started having these headers having issues with our farmers. And it was actually not addressed at the state level. It was addressed at the local government level. The king called the leadership of these people, brought them in. You've been here for many years. We've never had issues. This is coming. Go back, talk to your people. The next time this happens, those at that level, you can address certain issues. But when you now start having the international dimension to it, now that means our immigration have to up their ante. Our military services have to up their ante when they are coming with AK-47, mauling down military men, mauling down police. No, that's something that you can't expect the traditional ruler to address. Like the issue we have in Zamfara. Even when the traditional ruler raises his voice, the following day he's kidnapped. So it's a very serious issue, and I think those in the it's hydra-headed. There is no one can fit it all to solving the issue, and the federal government actually has a leadership role to play to solving it.
Now, talking about leadership, Mr. Dooyum, I don't know your first-hand experience, but I read reactions online from communities in Benue who were somewhat annoyed that despite the initial order given by the president to the chief of army staff, he only but visited Benue for a few hours and left, as against the reports widely circulated on media that he had been redeployed to Benue.
Yeah, that's the same thing we are talking about. It appears government tend to make a talk without truly following the talk with actions. How would we reconcile the fact that we had read in the news and we had celebrated that the army chief had temporarily relocated to Benue to make sure that the situation was brought under control? just a few days down the road, and we had the worst. I think that's the most terrible, the worst of the attacks that have happened, in the series of attacks that have been unleashed on the people of Benue. And I think this is the basis for the anger of the residents and the citizens and the general community members, and then those affected directly or indirectly.
But the Benue State governor is also giving some credit to the federal government. I also like to find out on that. He says initially 17 local governments were plagued by insecurity, but the government's effort has reduced it to 3. Is that the true picture?
Yeah, that's a true picture, but in a situation like this, he is the chief security officer of the state, so he has access to information we may not have. And the truth is, truth be told, yes, the situation was, based on the statistics that we have, was worse than what it is. We had an interaction with the Commissioner of Police, and he said what is happening is like a reprisal from the efforts they have made in combing the other communities. So he gave an analogy, like you strike a snake, you cut his head, it doesn't die overnight. It's this struggle. So this is like the wiggling of the snake whose head has been crushed. Let's go with that narrative. Let's also sincerely hope that, yes, this is coming on the heels of the efforts of both the state and the federal government to flush, to make sure the communities are safer for people to return to their normal livelihood.
Mr. Shewa, on this matter, it's also in the opposite in Sokoto. Visuals circulating on the online space showed military personnel, side-by-sides bandits, who were wielding AK-47 rifles in a dialogue. And many were asking, the kill order had been given on this, they're on the wanted list. Why is the military dialoguing with such bandits when, on the other hand, there's a vow by the CDS to crush banditry? Is there political will in this conversation?
That's a contrast. It's a contrast. Bear in mind that this type of arrangement had actually taken place in Zamfara, taken place in Katsina, sometimes ago in Kaduna. And what was the outcome? Banditry and header killers simply went on the rampage after having handshake and having photo shoots with governors and other highly senior government officials. Maybe we should paint a picture that will let us situate and appreciate the tragic incidents we have in our hands. The all-out war between Israel and Iran had gone on now for about 4 days. And the total lives that have been lost, I mean, a war that involves the shooting of missiles and dropping of bombs using fighter jets in their hundreds. We've had less than 90 lives lost. One single attack on one single village in Benue, we had over 200 lives lost. That tells you how tragic this situation is. And you know, we are very quick. The conversation that is uppermost on the lips of people, even on social media, is Iran and Israel, where you had just about 80-something lives lost. And we have, in our own backyard, over 200 lives lost. And it just seems it's business as usual. And I just think government at all levels must really see this not just as an impending danger. It's not impending, it's here. We have been confronted with these monsters. Whether you call them local, you call them international, it doesn't change the fact that they are unleashing mayhem on Nigerian citizens.
Now, the federal government has over time talked about its non-negotiation policy, its non-ransom payment policy. But when these issues happen, is it a policy that differs per region, or do you think it should be a policy that applies to all regions regardless of the forms of insecurity?
Sadly, the policy statements contrast the point by the federal government, because I've heard General Musa himself one or two occasions where he alluded to the fact that they will use kinetic and we also use non-kinetic, I mean informal meetings. These are normal things. I've heard the Minister of Defense, former governor of Kebbi State, what's his name? Badaru. I've heard him use the same statement. So the moment you are using such loose semantics, kinetic, non-kinetic, you are simply inferring that where we need to use the guns, we will use the barrel of the gun. Where we need to call you and pat you on the back and possibly give you some things and target amnesty, we will do that. That everyone knows that's the immediate meaning of that type of statement. But we have used it for more than a decade. We have not seen any result. So why not just confront these guys, bring them on their knees, and let them relocate elsewhere? Even if they are international folks, they can go to other places where maybe their security is so porous and careless, and let them do what they need to do. But for once, we saw it in Plateau, 100 plus people lost in one single night. Now we are in Benue, 200 plus lost in one single night. It's only getting worse.
Maybe no go tomorrow.
It might be another state tomorrow. So we shouldn't fold our hands and just assume that it's Plateau and Benue that are bearing the brunt. They will only be emboldened. If they do this and nothing serious comes out of it, they will definitely dovetail into other states.
And I think
to add to that.
All right, yeah. It still brings us to where we started from. What we have seen is a calculated, deliberate attempt at land grabbing, as been alluded in some quarters, and so we have tended to go with that narrative. Elsewhere, we had tried to reduce the scenarios to farmer-headers clashes, but we have seen that it's beyond the normal farmer-header clashes. In this case, the scenario in Benue, the Yelwater incident, it wasn't a conflict between farmers and herders. It was just an onslaught on a community. And these people, wherever they're coming from, it's not the issue at the moment. The issue is the fact that the lives and safety of people is at stake. People no longer sleep. People can no longer go to farms. So you are looking at beyond the immediate, the loss of senseless killings, the loss of lives that are gone, wasted, the humanitarian crisis that this has actually created. In the long run, you also have a food security crisis. Because a state like Benue, which is primarily an agrarian state, the people depend heavily on the farming
also
activities.
Christian, the food basket of the nation.
Yes, so it means the basket will become emptier by the day. So what becomes of the larger Nigerian community, which depends heavily on food produce from states like Benue? So it's okay, it's very important, and at least it's comforting that the CNC, no other than the CNC, has moved in, has planned to move in himself. If there were political differences from factions or same political party in the state, the Abuja people, the Benue people, the blame games here and there, for once, there's an opportunity for everybody to come on the drawing board. Let's sit on the table. We're talking about life. We're talking about Benue. We're no longer talking about party politics. We're no longer talking about loyalty to X, Y, Z, or this or that. We're talking about the situation that has actually come to stay, and if we do not come together collectively as a people to fight the monster, like he said, is hydra-headed. So it's not just a Benue thing. It's not just a Plateau thing. It's not just a Zamfara thing. I think it's a Nigerian problem.
Well, this problem is a Nigerian problem. Much has been reiterated by Mr. Dooyum. He's also talked about the implications on food security. An agrarian state like Benue is vastly affected. Now, my next question is on the spillover effect, because Benue and Plateau share boundaries. Benue and Cross River share boundaries. These are also states that have this challenge of being able to secure their borders. It's not like we have fences delineating the borders between these states. How do state governments, work in collaboration to forestall a spillover of these marauding killers into their own states?
Thank you. We have this penchant of pushing every narrative to the doorstep of the federal government. But sadly, we are running a federal system where our constitution recognizes that there are exclusive responsibilities to the federal government. There are also concurrent responsibilities between the tiers of government, and in that manner, the issue of security as it were today, when we reach peak as this, when lives are lost, it becomes an international issue. Of course, no other person than the Pope, actually had to speak to the issue. That tells you it's now a global issue. And for me, that's actually what informed the type of reaction we are seeing. Before now, we usually don't see this type of immediate reaction, but it has become a global conversation. Our government and leadership at the local government level, I think they've really not done their fair share. That's the truth. And like he alluded to, even in Benue, we had no other person than the governor suggesting that the security lapse in the state is partly occasioned by infighting between political actors. And that for me is a bit not
a true reflection of the situation.
Not really. No. Like Mr. Dooyum said, he might have access to some information, but as the governor of the state, you must be a bit more discreet, a bit more circumspect. The way you present, especially security issues, you can't just throw things like that in the public domain. All right, we have seen states that taught this part, things simply escalated instead of getting things under control. And my fear is that we are about 2 years to the election. By our history, we have a historical antecedent in the country that shows us clearly that when election is a few months off, security situation gets worse. That is a historical thing. Because political actors now start taking advantage of such security lapses to make careless statements, to even fan the embers of crisis. That's the norm. So when you come 2 years to the election and you have interest of throwing yourself back to have a rerun, and you are beginning to make this type of statement, you are fanning the ember of crisis, and it's needless. So other governors, back to your question, need to now borrow a leaf, what we call community policing, where the local government system will be brought together to ensure that they have a better hold on who comes in, what goes out, and monitor things within their immediate community. I will still allude to the style in Ekiti State. For instance, my immediate community, there was a period we were having this burglary issue. It was becoming very nauseating in the community, and all they did was the local government chairman called the king and said, this is becoming unbecoming in your community. And the king called the meeting of all the families, and all he said was, if your word is caught, forget any support by the community. If there is anything, the community will hire his own lawyer and ensure that your child goes to prison. And it was like, when they came back, they told us the outcome of the meeting. I just laughed at it. I said, "That's what type of resolution? What type of resolution is that?" But guess what? The thing stopped. It completely stopped, because they were speaking from the background that even if an outsider were to come in to do that thing, he still needs an insider to help him to gain access to those places. The moment they said that, what we noticed in the community was that the bad guys simply left the community. They just relocated, and it solved the thing. So we need to now begin to take advantage of those layers of security before we now get to the level where the federal government need to come in with the soldiers and the navy and the rest of them. So we must take care of security at that level.
Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid this is as much time would afford for us to discuss this, but I must thank you for having this conversation. Before we go, it's on the inflation rates. Whilst this is the prominent issue in the news, I'd just like to get your thoughts as well. The NBS has published its May statistics, and we're told that Nigeria's inflation has eased slightly to 22.97%. Mr. Dooyum, does this truly reflect?
No, it does not. Before you even finish, it does not. I personally have a problem with the statistics being churned out by the government on a daily basis, because we live amongst Nigerians on a daily basis, we interact with Nigerians on a daily basis. We would be happier if the statistics shown reflects or the quality of life of an average Nigerian has actually received a boost or has improved. As a result of the improvement in the statistics, the economic position or the policies of government and position on issues of the economy. So let's see if there has been a shift. Let us see how that shift will translate to having an immediate impact or effect on the life of an average Nigerian.
And now when you look at the rebased statistics, they're talking about prices of food items. They're also talking about the service charge on certain commodities, telecom space and whatnot. He said it doesn't reflect your view.
Well, my view is a bit contrary to Mr. Dooyum's view, maybe in part because that's my discipline, and I know that economic growth, for instance, is not static, it's fluid, like we say. So what that means is that you might not see the immediate impact, but it doesn't mean something is really not happening as it were. If you look at the impact of the inflation figure, I was largely about food, and anybody who has been in the market in the past few weeks will also notice that especially the staples, the most patronized goods like rice, we have seen a dip in their prices, and of course that reflects it might be, in fact it's not marginal for food like rice. It's actually not marginal. A bag of rice before now used to be 80 something and above, but we'll begin to see it come down to as low as 55, 57 in some places, and so these things will reflect eventually in the figure. But like every economist will tell you, economic development is not the same as economic growth, and this theory over time will now begin to percolate into some other areas, and over time we begin to see it. The drop is so marginal in the inflation figure. We are hoping the monetary and the fiscal policy holders will keep on this trajectory, so that, you know, last month we saw that for after a very long time our export as a nation is far lower than our export as a nation is higher than our import. Those are positives on the side of our fiscal and monetary policy handlers. They just need to keep at it. Over time, we begin to also see that impact trickling down. The price of food will get stabilized. We just hope this war between Iran and Israel does not escalate and make things worse, so that we now start having on it has impacted price of oil, but we just hope it doesn't get worse, so that it doesn't affect us, because we still depend largely on imported oil to.
Well,